Hello, everyone. Today I have with me a very, very dear friend and special guest, Gaurav Kumar. Gaurav Kumar is joining us from his office in Bangalore. He works with upGrad and has spent several years in the education space and is going to be sharing his insights on the future of work, helping us shape this narrative one conversation at a time. And he's going to be sharing it from a lens of education, in addition to his vast experience over so many years. Gaurav, thank you so much for doing this. Absolute pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, Vibha. Thank you for having me here. Much appreciated.
All right. So, Gaurav, before we get deep into this conversation on the future of work, could you just share a little bit about your early years, educational background? Where are you coming from, and what's the journey been for you so far?
Sure. So interesting question. Because you mentioned early years, so that gives me a cue.
Sure.
I studied in a government school.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, great. Great. This conversation already started off on an interesting note.
Somewhere in the Hindi heartland, Bihar, and eventually pursued my undergrad, moved to one of the IIMs, did my master's from there. I started as a banker. Somewhere in 2008 was when my baptism in the sector happened, in the education sector happened, where I was part of one of the largest education companies at that point of time, listed ones. Had a brief stint as an entrepreneur in education, primarily in higher ed, failed miserably, and then decided to do consulting because I knew what I can tell people not to do.
Why did you venture fail if you had to pinpoint?
I think if you ask me, and maybe that's a much larger conversation, but your ability to focus between services and product. If I have to understand this from today, we were less of a product and more of a services, and we needed to that kind of foresight, and some bit of nudge, which happened, but by then I guess it was a little late, and immediately we had moved on. But that's one line, if I have to say that. Nevertheless, so moved from there to consulting, spent reasonable time working with central government of India, multiple state governments, public, private sector education providers across K-12, early childhood, higher ed, skilling, international education, foreign universities, on various facets of education, strategy, operations, efficiency, investment, growth, expansion, quality, activity, and so on and so on. And for last 4 odd years, I'm part of one of the largest higher ed tech company out of Asia. And in fact, probably one of the largest, probably the largest guys, where we work across the workforce development, higher education, career spectrum, from an 18-year-old to a 50-year-old, trying to be relevant, meaningfully impactful, in their higher ed or career journey.
Okay.
So that's briefly about me. Very happy to delve either of.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. I'm excited to have this conversation now, considering you stem literally from the grassroots. You went to IIM Indore and ended up seeing length and breadth of this sector. And now you're seeing it from a technology perspective with upGrad, and seeing how technology gets infused and changes the landscape of education. If you could talk a little bit more about what upGrad really does and what your role is within upGrad, so we get that context.
Yeah, sure. So while we started focused on upskilling, particularly for working professionals, over a period of time, we have built this whole, value prop where someone who's an 18-year-old and wants to do undergrad, and as we know, quality of undergrad college country is quite challenging. And can we give you a high-quality undergrad experience in an online environment? Where we understand pedagogy, which is required for online, which doesn't necessarily is a mirror image of what happens in a classroom, for example, or the kind of intervention, or the kind of technology, or the kind of, various stimulants you need to build in, and either that, or you're a working professional trying to switch career, or trying to grow in whatever you are doing, and you believe a bit of upskilling, a bit of higher ed, a bit of mentoring will help. So we come in there. And all of this we do with partnering some of the universities across India, US, UK, Australia, and so on. And lots of work we do where upGrad has built its own, courseware and certificates with learners. And this is a little this I'm trying to simplify.
Okay.
You have multiple tenets there.
So
But
it's skilling
yeah.
as well as degree granting as well. You're granting undergraduate degrees as well.
We aren't granting, we work with universities to help them. Because again, if you look at who are the stakeholders here, you have one education provider, an university or a college, you have a student, you have an employer, and then you have a government or a country. Because technology education is a priority in many parts of the world. Whether here you go to lots of large Middle East countries, they will come and say, we have a vision for a technology-driven country A, country B, and we need to equip our talent. So I always see them as a major stakeholder. So first, we go to universities and say, if you are a great university, maybe your campus gets 2,000 guys, 4,000 guys, 5,000 guys. Take example of the largest, most prestigious technology university in the world, Caltech. Caltech annual intake is less than 2,500, 3,000. But I'm sure the kind of pedigree, the kind of content, the kind of academic prowess they have built, it could impact much more. And but the concern they will always have is, if I go online, it dilutes.
Sure.
Can you work with them and more? And this is just a name, not that we work with them, but them and more, to help them create a scale with impact. I think we always tell university that you should be able to do impact at a scale, and that can only happen when you go online, and you are assured and convinced that the academic quality and the rigor doesn't drop. So that we work, and similarly we work with the students who aspire to be there, and it's a very fine point, because see, education is not Netflix. You do content binge on Netflix, but you don't necessarily binge online content in education unless it is something extremely interesting for you. Even more challenging when your tech interface or your tech experience in other part of your life is with e-commerce, with music, with movies, with a cab booking, with quick delivery, where technology solutions are supremely smart. So when you do that, and then you come to an education or a provider which is with technology, and you just see a video running and in a flat, monotonous way, it just doesn't work. Because my own expectation with technology is so
elevated, right?
High today. So you have to keep competing with them.
Sure.
And that's where I think technology plays a very, very significant role. I don't think it is at par with what you would otherwise expect. And you can say, what, if e-commerce is Amazon, education has the same experience with platform A, platform B. Sure. But that's the aspiration, if I may say. So that's a big part where I want to highlight.
Okay.
And government and so on. Anyway, yeah, over to you.
All right. So of course, many stakeholders, and these are the key stakeholders in almost every economy, right? You mentioned students, universities, governments, and corporations. This essentially takes over the entire adult population of any country. You're going to play one of these four roles in any country. So what you're doing is, in essence, touching upon every adult in every part of the world. Essentially, you could. Now, given what you're doing, given the lens you see the world from, why would you want to keep an eye on the future? Why try to understand this subject? Why do you think this is an important conversation for anyone to have or listen to?
Extremely important, because I think, in the beginning of the conversation, you said that world is changing so much, and the kind of technology changes or development we have seen in primary sectors, secondary sectors, and a great deal in tertiary sectors as well. I think whenever we hear of technology, we first think Gen AI, AI, ML. But the point is, even if I look at manufacturing, and you pick those very early sectors like textile, I'm just giving an example. You take early sectors like food processing. They may not be as headline grabbers as a as a Gen I company, but the whole integration of technology has changed so much that and the skill sets required in the same site, same place is changing rapidly. You know, it's a very interesting data someone should go and look at. That to produce a metric ton of fabric or a million meter of fabric in a plant, if in 90s there were 100 people, it reduced 30, 20, 30, 40% in 2000. It is now reducing another 30% by 2020, and I believe it will reduce another 10, 15% by 2030 and 40. So, but if that's happening, and that's happening primarily because of advent of technology, it's just one example, and it is happening across sectors. So it is
how are you seeing it in your specific sector? If you were to take the lens of education,
but we are directly impacted, right? Because if I'm expected to be at cusp or if I'm the a tip of the spear as far as prepping manpower, prepping talent is concerned, then you need to keep an eye on how it is changing, how it is impacting the particular sector, the particular industry, the particular organization, the workforce distribution, and skill sets required across those functions, and whether academic institutions are keeping up with it or not. And if they are not, and that's where we guys come in and say, okay, hey guys, let's figure this out, let's do this together, and keep bringing those skill elements which help our guys be relevant 4 years from now. If you are enrolling in undergrad computer science today, and you're passing out in 2027, 2028, I'm sure computer science would have changed significantly. And if you aspire to be an entrepreneur, you aspire to go code at Google, or do next leg of EV with Tesla, your curriculum definitely needs to keep an eye on how it is, how it's going to look like.
I think the use case in your business and your sector is very, very obvious. How the world is changing, companies are going to have to keep up with this change. You're responsible for skilling this talent. You better keep your eye on the future, because you're skilling young talent essentially for future skills. Okay, your use case is very, very obvious. Thank you for sharing that. So, when we think about the future of work, and, I read a bunch of reports and have done some interviews, a couple of primary factors have been identified as sort of forces of future of work. So some of the forces we are seeing coming through are changes in technology, of course, geopolitical conditions, move towards sustainability. There are these certain broad areas. So from your lens, if you were to see it, what are globalization is another trend that's coming. So what are you seeing? Are you ethical considerations, right? Like a lot of people have become more purpose driven. So in your world, what do you feel are the big factors that are coming, and how are they coming in and disrupting your sector?
Yeah, I think if you do a pyramid kind of structure, and at no point of time trying to dilute some of the parts which you said later, but I guess the primary concern, if I may say, is how fast the underlying technology is changing, which is an input metric for those sectors. And the early adopters are driving efficiency, driving cost advantage, and so it just becomes survival criteria for the rest to follow. And when you do that, the whole ecosystem needs to change accordingly. The academic institutions, the policies, the ease of doing business, the geopolitical relations,
domino effect. Okay.
The capital allocation, etc., etc. That's, I would see that in the pyramid, that is the biggest pie.
Technology sits at the top of your pie.
Technology, by all means. And second is also, see, with of course, because you brought geopolitical. So one is, manufacturing trying to shift from one particular country to a few more, but also because there are few geographies which are emerging significantly in terms of, whether the stakeholders' ability to attract right businesses by opening up policies, or inherently those geographies being stronger with educated, skilled manpower. And we had an advantage in 90s when tech boom happened. Or you keep hearing about very recently how Vietnam is punching above its weight. Or you keep hearing about, despite of being war torn, Ukraine is a hub for very smart coders and technology talent for the world. But these are very inherent strength these countries or geographies have, which are again changing, because you're suddenly talking about distributed workforce. You're talking about globally connected workforce. You're talking about, if you're under cost pressure, then you're suddenly talking about outsourcing, and not outsourcing what we saw in 90s, but outsourcing your high-end product tech development across sectors to somewhere else. You should also be reminded, I think, and I think we all should be reminded there, that when we think of technology, we always think of the ITs companies and the Googles and the Facebooks and the Metas of the world. But the fact is, you look at any industry today, it could be pure manufacturing, it could be iron ore, it could be energy, it could be capital goods, it could be automobile, it could be textile. They all have huge technology workforces.
Okay, and we could stick to just your sector and your expertise. If you could share with us, how are you seeing technology affect education? That would be very helpful. What have you seen already in the last so many years, and what are you seeing coming up as a trend?
Yeah, so as I said, I think one is, of course, how well equipped you are to break the boundaries and increase accessibility. So let's start with that accessibility becomes a big point. And when you say that,
I think technology is going to be a fillip towards accessibility.
By all means, it is. I think to a certain extent it is today. And by all means, someone sitting in Udhampur or someone sitting in Jharsuguda, Odisha, can do a University of XYZ data science AI ML course.
They can do that today, right? So what's going to change in the next 10 years?
I'm just coming to that. And then, because so the whole bit of, and there is lots of talk about personalization, for example, right? Or mentoring and coaching.
Sure.
But your ability to do this at a scale is always a challenge. And that's where I see technology becoming a supremely critical enabler. And at no point of time, I'm at all saying that humans will be completely out. But I can tell you today, anecdotally, we have seen that how a reasonable 20-30% of the conversation, today a mentee or a student or a participant is doing with a tech platform, or someone who is, or doing with a bot, and which is becoming smarter, for example. And these could be academic, guidance. This could be non-academic guidance. This could be career guidance. This could be very specific subject matter guidance, for example. So that's a big one. Second, as I said, because you're trying to take the personalization to different level, but at the same time, you're talking about, millions of guys studying online, and all of us have learned very differently. So what kind of data points we are today capturing, and we have seen, and how it is rapidly increasing. How are you consuming data? How are you consuming a certain subject? How are you consuming? Photosynthesis was always in our books as a pictorial description. Because it was just easier to articulate, visible, telling that sun's ray comes and the blah 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 happens. And I'm just
we've all seen that image of the soil and the sky.
Exactly. And it was just so natural, right? So similarly, bringing that and saying what works in what form of content delivery for what set of learner, what set of geography, with what kind of background. So today, for example, I'll give you an example. With us or elsewhere, we see 40% of people who are trying to come and learn artificial intelligence or machine learning have studied humanities in their undergrad. and they now want to learn coding. But if I am teaching, I can't teach that person with a bachelor computer science person who brings the same same approach will not work.
Sure.
Language is another language plays another big part. Your ability to, and again, we all understand, decipher, infer, imbibe any kind of content or any kind of learning very differently.
Very different. Yeah.
So a learner, you are capturing 100 odd data points of a learner in a real-time environment. How fast he or she is moving, what kind of video they are stopping, revisiting, figuring out, coming back. What kind of how are they in summative assessments, how are they in formative assessments, and based on that, can I build a data set which just gets personalized? Is it anyway near to perfection today? No. Is that the way I see technology enabling us to go forward? By all means.
By all means, okay.
But what has happened in last 12, 18 months with the whole advent of Gen AI, and how we have started, trying to learn and integrate that in our delivery, and as it becomes smarter, our ability to be smarter on top of it just gets much more, possible. So I definitely see that happening. In other big part I see in our sector particularly happening is, if you notice, most of what I have talked about is primarily technology, that to AI, ML, But it's also a fact that manufacturing sector needs equal amount of integration of technology to teach those stuff outside. But today you don't teach an automobile engineering online. You don't teach textile engineering online. You don't teach heavy goods engineering online, because technology just doesn't necessarily support you. You expect them to have that, you actually need to go to the lab, put gloves, get your hands dirty, and all of it. I do believe technology, whether we do this or someone else will do this, but sooner the technology should be, cross this boundary which we have put ourselves for online education, go in those sectors which are still very niche, not necessarily happening at a scale. And then tomorrow, if I have to teach someone on next gen of EV, this could happen in an online format. In an online format. I think that will be a real big changer. Third element, if you notice, is the whole inclusive agenda which we have, and that is across, whether that is across diversity, other spectrum of that is financial inclusion. And when you talk of financial inclusion, for that matter, how do you build credibility? How do you reach out to the audience in the language? And language is not the alphabets, but in the in the broader sense of language, you can explain them to understand. And how can it become consistent across different kind of assets class, different kind of aspiration, different kind of earning groups, in different kind of geography? Because what money matters to the part where you and me live in, versus what money matters to the part in many parts of the world, it's quite different. I see in financial inclusion it playing a very significant role, and some of the stuff we have tried integrating in our in our own little way. So okay, I think this has been a longer monologue. I will stop.
What I'm hearing is a technology to help you solve whatever problem you're trying to solve at much larger scale. You're seeing technology help with scale, potentially engineering education coming to your home, which will be a radical change, because so far, of course, we've all been used to laboratories, etc., to do this. And you spoke a lot about personalization, about essentially user profiling. That's done at a much more advanced level than it is today. Of course, there is user profiling going on right now, but you're seeing much more granular user profiling.
Much more granular, much more, and it just brings lots of efficiency overall.
Do you see any challenges with all these changes? Do you foresee the inclusivity gap getting wider? Sometimes when I talk to people, right now it's the literacy gap is, and same using language metaphorically, is already pretty wide. what will happen in a generation or a day when you have advanced learners getting access to so much information personalized at your doorstep, etc. And then you'll have again one segment of society that's left out completely. Don't you think that's going to broaden the chasm in some ways?
See, I actually don't subscribe to that, and I will give you my reason. My reason is, pick any other sector. Technology has rather been, able to bring people from not having access to the part where having access to has happened. And take e-commerce, take in India itself, and so just to give you data, in India itself, if you look at pre-data level, pre-Geo's days, look at the data consumption, look at the number of smart mobile, look at the online consumption of any kind of content, versus how it changed when the revolution happened.
Sure.
When data became much accessible, number of smartphones went much higher. 40, 50, 60% of e-commerce delivery through Amazon e-com or Flipkart is happening in tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 cities, right?
Don't you think your argument stands accepted? The upper society, of course, access to wealth, etc. We've seen a massive radical shift in middle India, right? Today's middle India is very different from the middle of India of 20 years ago, even because of the access to technology. There's no longer India's middle class has also become a relatively wealthy middle class compared to what you and me grew up thinking of a middle class household.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. Yes. Yeah.
I'm talking about the absolute bottom of the pyramid. That bottom of the pyramid effect, somehow I'm not seeing, I don't see 20 years ago, absolute bottom of the pyramid radically having shifted. And I'm only flagging my concern that I hope that that bottom doesn't still get left behind in the next 20 years as we make the middle and upper middle and the higher classes, okay, very adept with technology. Now we're all, playing the same game. In a way, it's equalized between middle and upper middle India quite a bit, the gap, but I'm worried about the lower, and I'm wondering how we can solve for that.
Yeah, I think, and that's a valid point. I think, what the way I see, or the way I would aspire, and the way I would like to believe that it's going to happen is, the lack of accessibility is primarily because of lack of awareness, B, lack of opportunities, C, lack of access, and in this particular in our particular sector, maybe lack of a device. 3, even if there is a device, whether the device is compatible to run a high-end content. So, experience on a handphone versus experience on a machine is much different. And last but not but the least, affordability of that content. If the content is $1,000 for an hour, yes, you have nailed it. It's not going to work. It's not going to work. So at scale, because technology also gives you an opportunity to go at a scale, and at a scale, the cost comes down.
Sure.
When you are building the content for the world, not particularly one geography, the unit cost on the bottom for someone to consume is coming down. Another ecosystem has to evolve, and which I think is in much better shape for everyone, including the bottom of the pyramid, is the device ecosystem. The device ecosystem, whether cost of a smartphone or cost of a machine. And again, there is lots of work happening through civic societies. There's a lot of work happening through government agencies as well, where they're trying to, laptop in a class, laptop in a home, device in a home, laptop to a girl child, and there are multiple,
This policy side needs to keep up.
By all means. By all means. I think, I always give this example that some of the greatest revolutions in the world happen with help of civic societies and government coming together. Sure. Whether it is, the farmer rights in California, to the same-sex marriage, to the apartheid, to the polio elimination in the country, or the blindness disease at a scale in Bangladesh.
So governments around the world need to now play a much more significant role.
Yes. So this is an ecosystem. This is an ecosystem where various players have to do their job. I have reasons to believe it's better. It's nowhere near the great place, but it's much better than what it used to be 10 years back, for example.
So we're not in utopia yet, but at least we're better off than we were some
Yes.
months ago. Okay, fine, fair point. Okay, let's shift to workspaces. You know, you mentioned you were in the office right now. Do you think you would be doing this interview from an office space 15 years from today? How are you seeing workspaces evolve? How are you seeing it in your personal office environment? How much of it has flipped? And what do you think the future workspace is going to look like? Are the offices going to remain?
I think, see, we all have seen how the world has changed after COVID. For example, I have multiple colleagues and companies part of our group where people don't come to office at all, and it works perfectly. More than technology, and while technology will play the role, maybe the video conferencing solutions and the Zoom solutions and the interface solutions will get much better, will be much more intimate. I would like to believe offices will have a different role to play. And
what role do they play? Will it be a socialization role? Just
that's one. But also think of a early professional passing out of university and never having to go to office because he or she can do all what required from the home or from the place of their choice. The whole social learning element, you mentioned that, or the whole mentorship opportunities, or the peer learning opportunity, and the whole bunch of life skills otherwise, would be a bit of missed opportunity.
But that is definitely a red flag and a danger. It's some of it is even true today, right? Even if you're not straight out of college, but you're 5 years into your. I remember the kind of mentorship I had 5 years out of my college. I had a fantastic boss who taught me many things, and which I'm sure you're doing for many people in your capacity today. So that problem holds through our career, right? Even if you're in your mid-40s, there will be someone who's 60, the chairman of the company is now training you.
Exactly.
So your point is very, very valid. The mentorship angle is premium. And what happens? What are you predicting?
Also, because, and just to before I come, also because, see, the definition of work ethics or a definition of the productivity is very different in different part of the world. Right. And very
a week to 7-hour week and 70 hours per week.
Very recent, the whole
sure
online ruckus which has panned out because one of our senior industry leaders said something about.
And why not? That's his opinion, right? He thinks 70 hours a week, he's entitled to his opinion.
Absolutely. And we all don't necessarily, I would like to believe, and I don't know whether it is online education, I think it is more of human psychology, but we all are not engineered, wired, geared equally.
Okay.
And at times the community and the ecosystem helps us, observe, learn, push, and maybe
everything you're saying to me, it sounds like you're very much in favor of keeping the office alive.
At the risk of inviting wrath of the many, I do believe it has a role to play.
It has a role to play, of course.
I don't think I have an opinion right now with lots of conviction whether that is a 1 day in a week, 3 day in a week, what's the proportion of blended looks like.
Sure.
But it will always have a role to play. And I don't think we have evolved, and at least, as I said, the definition of work and ethics and productivity is very different. I don't think we have evolved that, this just goes out and it will be business as usual. Not in many industries.
Not for many industries.
Not in many industries.
Okay. So you're not seeing offices just become data warehousing sheds and then everything else happens from home.
But data warehousing sheds is already happening on cloud. So you actually, right, you actually don't need that. But yes, you will see in many sectors the dependency on the requirement of having a workplace to go and then only be able to, perform
Mm.
or do what you're supposed to do is already going away,
Mm.
and it will go away. It
Mm.
will also have a color on, the geographies.
Sure.
How A part of the world will move is not necessarily the B part of the world is going to move.
Mm.
And I will give I will share an anecdote. It's a very different example, but I was speaking to the largest manufacturer in a particular sector who's based out of southern India, supply to all the global guys. And he says, I have two large factories, one in Tamil Nadu and one in one of the Hindi heartland states. And he said, everything is same, and yet the productivity is 35% less in one versus other. And it is nothing but humans at play.
Sure. Okay.
Humans at play, and this may be a little rustic example, but I think that is valid in every sector, depending on which geography you are sitting in.
Okay, so it'll depend on geography, it'll depend on the human labor potential, it'll depend on the mindsets of the people, and of course, it'll depend on the sector and what role you're performing. Okay,
Absolutely.
okay, great. All right. So now, we've spoken about sort of broadly what factors are coming through, how workspaces are going to change. Given what's going to happen, what skills are you going to encourage, within your own organization for people to inculcate? If you were going to talk to young people, anyone from the age of 10 plus, what would you say? Like, look here, make sure you have these skills, otherwise the future is going to get the better of you. So both a little bit of hard skills and soft skills. What would you say one should be ready with?
Okay, I think answer is obvious, and I don't know if you would have. I'll be very keen to hear from you if at all you have heard back lots of different, but life skills is, I think, is supremely important. Soft skills is supremely important because I would like to say I'm a product of soft skills, I'm a
Sure.
product of life skills. So that's extremely important. Also because workplaces are far more connected. You work in a far more globalized setup. You no more grow up in Delhi and retire in Delhi. If I may use that example, you no more just connect with people from one place. Different beliefs, different religion, different geographies, different set of values. So that's supremely important. I think on the very hard skills, uh, technological awareness, or rather digital literacy,
Mm.
is I would like to believe is very critical. And what it means today will not mean the same 5 years from now and then 10 years from now.
Mm.
But how much clued in you are, plugged in you are, and have been able to equip yourself
Mm.
is refurbish yourself, if I say, is supremely important. Financial literacy is something which I see gets little undermined, across. Uh, Phenomenally important, you know, uh, uh, for people. It, I think, needless to say, you need to understand a bit of mathematics, or you need to understand a bit of, another spectrum of political science. Is are some these are some 3-4 things which come to my mind. The top of the brass.
What if I'm not STEM oriented? What if I'm a student and there are a lot of kids like that who's just like, I don't like computers. I'm
Yeah.
not interested. I want to learn how to play music. You
Absolutely all right. Absolutely all right. But again, I'm repeating that part. If you notice, I never talked about be an engineer or be a doctor or be a
know,
management
no,
graduate. Whether you are a musician, whether you are a carpenter,
no. Hmm.
whether you are a graphic designer, or
Hmm.
whether you are an investment banker or you are a writer,
You're
you know,
saying anything you want to do, digital literacy
it
is
is
now.
important. Financial literacy is important. Life skills, soft skills are important.
Hmm.
Political, aware of political sciences, aware of the geopolitical world we live in is
Hmm.
extremely important. So irrespective of the sector you choose, I would say.
Okay, it's very interesting because, like, when you go to music school or art school back in the day, or even today to some level, they say just focus on your art. Just learn how to compose, figure out
Yep.
the chords, and you will become, one of the best musicians in the world. And now comes a new paradigm shift where you're saying, hey, unless you know how to use the tools, unless you know how to leverage technology, And if you don't understand AI, right, you look at other musicians using AI to produce this phenomenal music, you're going to get left behind in
Yeah,
some.
yeah, and see, aberrations are always there, geniuses are always there. But with all due respect, Makbul Fida Hussain was one of the greatest marketer as well, apart from being a great artist, and that ability to market helped,
Hmm.
or any great sports person of this era
Hmm.
is equally good in soft skills and managing the whole digital space.
In the business
Yeah.
side.
So yeah. So and I would say those are soft skills, life skills, just being aware.
Okay, so you said technology skill, digital literacy, financial literacy, and soft skills. These seem to be top three on your list. Okay, thank you for sharing that. Now, if you know if this is what's required, and if you were going to advise, let's say, the human resource NHR, like the sector minister, and say, look, here's what you need to do. I've come from the education space. If we are looking at radicalizing India or radicalizing the world, here are policy changes I'm going to recommend. So let's think of it from the different factions. And you had started the interview with the stakeholders. So what advice would you give to, let's pick three stakeholders: the government, the education institutions that you also end up working with, and companies that you also represent. So what should companies be doing? What should governments be doing? And what should our schools and colleges be doing to ensure that the future is in bright for all of us?
That's easy. I think it's easy to preach. So let me do this. I think, see, for the governments, it's somehow I do believe that the ability to have that a mile ahead
Mm.
vision, that whatever we are producing here, whatever we are doing here, whatever we are teaching here, has to somehow go and be part of the world outside of schools or colleges. And those skills somehow have been always missed out in our higher education or school or school institutions. So I would like to believe that I would like to advise that we need to have a very detailed look at the curriculum we have, the kind of pedagogy we teach or follow,
Okay.
the kind of teacher, and these are little, painful pointers.
Okay.
But the kind of teachers we have, the kind of teaching quality or the teaching institution quality we have in this country, you
Hmm.
know, or many places.
What advice, like, if you were to specifically say, when you say, obviously, what
Look
else,
at the look.
curriculum, teachers, but what advice would you give
Look,
them?
one, I will start with revamp the teacher training institutions in the country. Uh, you
To
know,
do what?
two, so that a they're aware about the contemporary
Hmm.
way of teaching, learning, and using surrounding tools,
Hmm.
including technology. To my mind, that's a big skill gap
Hmm.
in teachers
Hmm.
across our, million odd schools.
Okay.
We have 300 odd million kids
So,
in our
so make the teachers
teacher
savvy.
training.
Okay, cool.
So make them
Curriculum, what advice are you giving on curriculum?
curriculum. I think one broader point I would make is make it more connected to the real world skills which are required, and
Hmm.
that essentially means whether it is you know integrating a bit of uh, skills or vocational skills, if I may say,
Okay.
is important. B, somehow our curriculum or our textbooks are designed to glorify a certain number of professions or a certain kind of professions. We need to be a little more inclusive there, because as a
Hmm.
child from the fourth year, as a 4 year old, when I went to school, the only example I have heard is an engineer,
Doctor, medical.
a doctor, or blah blah blah, or a teacher. But come on, there's so many out in the world,
Hmm.
and whether that is by design or by default, I'm not commenting.
Because the cutoff systems are also like that, right? Only in India, the humanities, if you were like, I wouldn't even have thought about humanities because I wasn't in that 60, 50,
Yeah,
whatever
yeah, yeah.
in school. But I actually love the humanities. So when I later on in university, I took so many humanities courses because I realized in India, it's sort of looked down upon. Like the not so smart kids would do humanities, right? Which in the Ivy Leagues, interestingly, are all liberal art dominated.
Yeah. So and that's a challenge, because and it's a our textbooks are designed that way, our teachers are wired that way, our society is wired that way. And I think a big start could be, what you can do definitely is to bring those subtle new, changes in your books,
Sure.
and make those
Hmm.
different professions little more aspirational,
Shift the balance for the other professions.
balance. And
Okay.
that's the reason I started with teachers,
Sure.
because if that changes, a great deal of changes in books happen,
Sure.
a great deal in the way those books are being taught
Sure. Okay.
happen, the way those kids are being counseled.
And what about educators? What should they be doing? Keeping an eye on the future.
I think you know and I will use this to talk about higher education institutions. Just be connected to the real world, because how well conversant you are with that industry or that employer, and being more real time, being more hands-on, being more applied,
Sure.
in your teaching is extremely important. Yes, we will teach people for fundamentals. We will have fundamental researchers coming out. But it's a fact that a large percentage of our higher education kids are also coming for applied work,
Sure.
across sectors.
You seem to be very big on this vocational training, skill-based training. It
I
seems.
would like to believe that. And even if you don't talk about the skills, I will give an example. Talk of today, Bachelor of Technology, Computer Science. I'm just going back to the same example. Uh, are we really teaching in those 4 years what essentially a kid end up, doing in the first month, second month, 1 year, 2 year, fourth year, fifth year of their career? There is a certain degree of disconnect.
Sure.
And you can't function in isolation. You're part of one ecosystem. So that's big. Second is, and because you said this, I'm glad that you pointed out integration of the what do you call it, the multi domain, in
Interdisciplinary.
interdiscipline. Because just because I'm studying engineering doesn't mean economics doesn't have a play,
Sure.
or human psychology that doesn't have a play, or business finance doesn't have a play. So that interdisciplinary approach again is a big gap in higher education institutions. While we say it's there, while we say we also have this, but I think it just remains
Yeah.
there. So
Okay.
that I would like to believe. Or see, I'm sure one can talk about invest, build infrastructure, build lab, hire people, focus on quality, admit.
But that's for today. That's not keeping a lens on the future. I'm not talking about just general expansion. I'm talking about
The
being.
whole the whole focus on you know promoting, for example, entrepreneurship, and entrepreneurship in not one domain, entrepreneurship across. Again, higher education institutions, barring a handful, don't necessarily have right kind of incubators and right kind of support systems.
Okay.
And these are the places where ideas are being created for 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line. And because no one is building for today, everyone is building for tomorrow.
Sure. Okay.
And maybe the first 5 years nothing will happen, but the kind of learning and the kind of ecosystem we would have built, 5 years will have far reaching impact in the years to come. So those are the things I believe higher education institutions definitely need to do going forward.
Okay. Now, with all this change coming, all this disruption happening, if you had to think of careers redundancy, so just like these careers, I think is just going to cease to exist in 15 years, and fresh careers that don't even exist today, that you'd say, hey, we better keep a lookout because these sort of careers are going to be required, and organizations like yours and others can start training people towards futuristic careers that are going to emerge. So have you thought about this internally or just in your brain, like what's coming and what's going?
See, I think there is already enough talk about X percentage of roles becoming redundant in years. There is a very famous McKinsey workforce future of work report.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there are more.
Hmm.
The way I see in terms of redundancies, which we have already started seeing, for example, the whole content ecosystem piece, lots of work we see getting redundant, and even in our orgs. And and otherwise.
Are you seeing it in your organization? Like if you could share an example, because generally everyone says, oh yeah, content is getting redundant. But if you could shed some specific light on it to explain how.
Just to give an example, when you build a content, any kind, there is someone, and you yourself are an educator or author, someone builds the macro level skeleton of content. Someone strengthens it. Someone does the whole proofreading. Someone brings the whole subject matter expertise to ensure that it's a certain order, and the whole process. And eventually it goes into production. Someone sits on a larger machine, understands how it will be designed, all of it. We see where there were 7 roles earlier, at least 3 of them are out. And because you are able to stitch this, there are tools which can stitch. There are tools which are doing proofreading with you. I think with using Gen AI, we have been able to do this much more quickly and smartly. There are video tools, for example, which are making the 3 production designers, the job that they were doing is now being done by 1. Just because you have very smart video tools which are able to filter out, clean out, stuff much sharply. You had someone who is just managing your content management library or content management system and was trying to integrate with the learning platform, and most of it is happening seamless now. Where you have just built those algorithms and programming, and it gets done. And this is just, and I'm talking about an organization which has 5,000 people.
Sure.
And there are much larger setups where much larger scale work is happening across these things. Similarly, and I'm sure you have been reading about the whole financial research domain, which is getting impacted a great deal. Not that the role will go away, but 80% of what the grunt work which was happening by a human is going away.
If we come back to your sector, what's going to happen to the role of educators and teachers? What do you see happening with robots coming into the classroom and with machines taking over, and all of us sitting at home and learning through the amazing courses and content that are available? What happens to the role of the teacher? Really knows so many teachers.
See, no one knows what happens 40 years from now or 50 years from now. Because if someone would have told me 50 years back that I can do a call like this,
or 10 to 15 year lens, now 40, 50 years.
It's very different, right? But if you ask me, I don't see technology changing teacher or replacing teachers at all. I do see technology becoming a great collaborator for teachers. Okay. And the smarter teachers will be much smarter by leveraging technology. I also see that but in this whole process, in the interim, I do see teacher community seeing technology as a challenger and a bit of resentment happening. But that's the degree of, but I guess that's where the learning curve has to take place. Learning has to take place. Some of the work, of course, lots of time is effort, resources today go into, for example, assessment. Technology can come and take care of a great deal of it. Grading, technology can come and take care of a great deal of it. You speak to any higher education institution teacher today or a school teacher, and will say, I have this much time going in building slides, building the content, building A, building B. And I believe technology will just be able to help them garner all those resources where the work which goes in not necessarily
actual teaching,
high impact productive areas, that kind of bandwidth could shift to high impact interventions. So those things will happen. But at no point of time, in next 10, 15 years from now, see, government of Maharashtra saying, looking for 20,000 robots for 20,000 primary schools in the state.
You don't
no more humans are being hired now. Okay. I don't see that happening.
You don't see that. Okay, so you don't see this absolute search for robots in classroom. You feel like it's largely still going to be human led, but collaborative with some elements.
Has to be. In my opinion, yes.
Okay, okay, great. Okay, and as we close off this conversation, my final question to you is, you've read this literature on this. There are people who are extremely optimistic about the future. They say, wow, it's going to be a great future. We're going to use machines, robots, efficiency is going to quadruple, etc. And then there are people who say, oh, I don't like the sound of this future. I don't like the sound of machines coming in and making me sort of so mechanical, me depending so much on a bot, etc. Which side of the spectrum are you on? Are you seeing this new world as a threat, as an opportunity? Are you optimistic? Are you pessimistic? Which side are you leaning on?
I have a middle of the road approach. I don't know if that's the answer you are seeking, but I have a middle of the road approach here. I think um, it will help a great deal to so many who
Hmm.
have been at disadvantage side. You know, healthcare, education, transport. You know, larger civic infrastructure. I see advancement of technology being a great enabler. Talk about, and just 30 seconds, talk about geriatric care issues in most of the part of the world. And yes, if there were trained humans, perfect, but if they are not, and if there is a robot which can take care of a elderly 85-year-old, you
Hmm.
know good job. I think I'm all for it.
Hmm.
Will it make our ability to have our social advancement in terms of skills, awareness, connectivity a
You're
bit.
saying geriatric care, like instead of your children now taking care of
I'm
you,
just
they
and I
could
just
potentially buy a robot who'd say, "Hey, mom, dad, here's
but
a robot going to take care of you. At least you'll be taken care of."
because that's already a challenge, right? That's the reason I say geriatric care is anyway issue in most of the world.
Sure, yeah. But at least
So
you're saying it's a solution to AI and
solution. It's a solution, or even and this we talk about working mothers. You know, lots of challenge, nuclear family, huge challenges because and the help and the da 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 da.
yeah.
Welcome technology. If it can help, it can play a role. Why not?
So you're saying there will be a robot in your house taking instead of your house help and instead of the father or the mother, there will now be this machine who will say, "Hey, child, now it's time to eat and now it's time to sleep."
Because you're my neighbor, don't tell it to my parents or my son because but I do see because I do prefer my son being around and my parents will definitely prefer me being around. But I do
Hmm.
see but I do see machines coming in.
You
Of
do
course.
see them coming in, huh? Really? You see them coming into the household and playing key character roles.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Of
Now you
course.
do see that. Okay, so I now are you seeing this now? They're seeing this as an opportunity. Though you're sounding optimistic about this as an opportunity.
It will have flip side. I talked about the greater dependency. You
Hmm.
know, I talked about lesser social connectivity
Hmm.
elements around it. I do see the hours which humans have spent talking or connecting or learning or observing will be probably diminishing because technology will do some of the stuff where that human interaction is required.
Hmm.
But that's a different kind of challenge, you know and that's again a work we
Actually, it's funny. I spoke
have
to
to do.
somebody who said, we're going to have
But
machines doing so much of the work that humans will have free time. And when they have free time, they will actually start socializing more with each other because now they have free time and the machines are doing a lot of the work. So it might end up being the flip side of what people are worried about saying, hey, I'm free. I'm going to play golf with my friends now. I'm going to go down and take a walk because I've put the machine to some work and I'll go back and monitor as needed. So,
80% of
yeah.
80% of our living rooms,
Hmm.
when three people sit, 80% of times, if you notice, they are on their phones
Sure. Yes.
while they have ordered their grocery, while they've ordered their clothes, they don't have to go to the mall, while they've ordered an Uber, while they've ordered a salon service, but they're not necessarily talking to themselves. The
Sure.
time, if I used to take 1 hour to drive to a certain place to get my hair done, just give
Hmm.
an example. Today I'm doing this at home.
Sure.
1 hour to pick fresh vegetable. Today it gets delivered at home. But that doesn't mean that my 1 hour with people around has necessarily gone up. Tell me if this observation is wrong, because if you watch 80% of the living room, we are
Sure.
on our.
You're on some device or the other. So you're going to be chatting with your robot, who's your fourth family member now. Okay. All right. Let's see. Let's see. The future is unknown to all of us, but definitely interesting for me as a subject to study. And with your insights, made it even more complicated in my head. But this was very, very helpful. Thank you for sharing your insights. I will keep you posted on the progress of the book and truly appreciate your help and your insights. Thank you so much.
Perfect. Thank you, Vibha. I hope it was useful.
Thank you.
Great watching.